theme of the conversation is really just going to be about change, kind of like the new landscape, and also his own personal change and as an artist. This conversation really came about of Steph and I just kind of know each other through the years of him, supporting the business, supporting the straps, and then we just thought it'd be a good kind of fun engagement. But yeah, let's get started. So welcome, Stephen. Thank you for coming to visit us in San Francisco, hot, sunny San Francisco, and we're excited to have you here. I want to start off just by talking a little bit about where you are right now as an artist. So if you can kind of give, maybe a brief introduction, but more so just kind of like, or more so how you would describe what you do right now.
Wow, it's such a broad question. I think for everybody that makes photographs, it's like pinpoint it. For me right now, I think it's just kind of like really stepping back and like really looking at my work and taking the time to like understand it. Understand like where I'm at, where I want to go with it, where have I been with it. Just marinating really, like just looking through old images, looking through recent stuff that I'm shooting, but not judging, like not jumping to be like, oh, that's a great photograph, like it's done, publish it through a social channel or do whatever with it, but more or less like sitting back and saying where does this sit with me? Like where does it sit as a collective in my collection of photographs?
And what's your, like, how do you describe yourself if you're meeting someone for the first time that's not familiar with your work?
I think I just tell some like people like I'm not a specific photographer, like I'm not landscaper, I'm just a photographer. To me, that was the whole appeal to the art form was it's so broad. Like I don't understand. Like I get that people can pinpoint themselves as I do this one type of photography, but for me, it's really a visual interpretation of how we all can see things. So like, why would I say like, well, I only want to look at this one thing, but I could look at everything else. Like to me, that's like the beauty of it. And I love the challenge. I love if you learn how to shoot sports, now you want to go shoot food. I was talking with a buddy, Kevin, earlier, where it's kind of like there's an aesthetic to every medium, shooting cars, food, bicycling, like all this different stuff that it's like, you have to understand it. And that's the challenge. Like, how do I do this properly, but also like find your own way with it.
I feel like that response is like something you've developed over time. How would you have described yourself, let's say, in a previous phase, or like 5 years ago? What would you have said if someone says, like, nice to meet you, I'm a chef, and then you would say...
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point, Van Styles, I would still consider myself a photographer, but like the large majority of the subject matter, if you want to call it boudoir, women, like that was just the element that I think, due to where I transitioned from, like that's just where my headspace was at. It was like, okay, this is the subject matter, but I was also in a different space with the social platform of like the fun of like, oh, well, these photos appeal to a mass audience. Like, I got to do more of this for that. And I think that was like where a bit clouded,
Got it.
Yeah.
So without trying to sound too much like, two grumpy old men, tell me a little about your feeling about where photography is right now in your world.
Photography, the plus side to it right now is that it's easily accessible. Everyone has a chance to explore the idea of being a photographer. Like, before photographers, I always seemed like they were like an unsung hero. Like you would see photos, you never knew who made the photograph, you never cared who made the photograph. Social media made it a lifestyle. Like, oh, like being a photographer, you get to travel, do what you love, you hang with cool people, you make cool photos, you kind of become a celebrity. I want that. So now it became this whole thing, but there's also like a downside to it because I would say like whenever you mix a popularity contest with an art form, you kind of like cannibalize the purity of it, and it's all self-discovery for a lot of people. Like you see someone popular that has an aesthetic that appeals to you, you want to like, in a sense, imitate, copy, whatever it is, because you're so inspired by it, But at some point you kind of get stuck because you're trying to cater to an audience versus like an artistry or just a self-finding aspect is like, again, it goes back to like just looking at your photographs, like how do these speak to me? Is this just something that I think fits with a contemporary feel, or is this really who I am? And I think that's the downside to what's going on with photography is that a lot of people are afraid to be themselves because there's so much emphasis on a follower count, popularity, likes, and like that's the goal to success, And people everyone is a brand and everyone talks about themselves being a brand, but they box themselves in. And when you box yourself in, like, I would meet friends of mine who shoot different subject matter. I can't post that on my feed. It's not on brand. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, you made the photograph. It is on brand. You made it. Like, but they're so consumed by what the audience is going to think that they're afraid to take that chance to, like, do it. Like, that's the downside I would say right now. It's like, it's a beautiful space where everyone is exploring it and everyone has the opportunity to see through, whether it's Instagram or websites, like different forms of photography, and experiment and try different things. The output is what's holding a lot of people back, I think.
So correct me if I'm wrong. It feels like photography world is kind of getting polarized, right? There's like almost like a traditional world and then a non-traditional world, which you could call like the modern area, the internet era. Was there like a specific encounter or experience? And correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you're kind of leaning more toward traditional, the artistry aspect. Was there a specific experience or encounter that made you realize I'm on this side and not that side, or talk to me a little bit about if you've got to travel between the two? I
think for me, it was a few things. I think one is like this idea that like you're trying to feed a machine. I think like anyone here who's been involved in social media and like marketing, whether it's your clothing company, whatever it is, you've put this unspoken pressure on yourself of like, I got to post at 12, I got to post at 6, like I got to give a routine, and we don't. Like, you're not generating millions of dollars of revenue that like you need to do this, but like we put this pressure on ourselves. And at some point with photography, for me, it was like, this is always something that I loved. So if I'm going out every day and I'm making a photograph that I love, it's like, and then we've all felt this probably, or you share the image, and it's like, shit, now I gotta go make another one. Now I gotta make another one. So you're not even taking the time to absorb, like what you're doing. You're just like pumping it out, and it's very draining. So I think that was like a realization, was like, hey, like I don't like this. Like I got into this and I followed this because I just love myself, like feeling of going home on my own. I'm appreciating what I did, the process, the photographs I made. So I think that was kind of killing it. Then I think for me, it was just like, well, where do I want to be? Like what's the bigger picture? Is the bigger picture to actually like think about the photos that I'm making, or just make a bunch of different images that like don't have structure to them? Like that's the tricky part too, is that like the beauty of the internet and like the community part is that we're all on our own to a degree, and we're all like learning. But what I realized is without a mentor, without a teacher, without someone to kind of like check you and say, well, like question you. A lot of people today are very sensitive to questioning. If you ask them about their pictures, like, oh, you're a hater, you're talking shit. Like, no, like I just want to hear like what it is like you're doing with this. And I think that's the big thing too, is like being able to understand that like we can learn as much as we can, but it helps to have that different set of eyes to kind of like nudge you or push you or like question you,
So speaking of mentorship, do you have a mentor? Well, what's your relationship with that, and how has that affected your career?
I had like one mentor early on who was like a second father figure to me. Wasn't a photographer, but just life and like kind of business lessons. As far as like photography stuff, I would just question people who I knew that were older, and it's like, what's your process towards that? And the idea was like, well, I could take what he explained to me and what he explained to me and he explained to me, mix it up and kind of like figure it out in my own way. That was like the idea. But I think photography is just more or less like the romanticism towards just the older greats that I really enjoy, versus like just kind of being solely caught up in yourself. So I would just kind of absorb like their quotes and their outtakes like towards photography and try to balance that out with like what's going on in the world today. Because it is tough. You want to balance traditionalism with not everything from back then can work now. So how do you blend it?
Would you recommend people out there right now that are seeking a career in photography, do you think mentorship is something that people should actively seek out as far as their career development, and what phase would they go do that? Anytime, early on? What do you think about that?
I would say for sure. And mentorship doesn't have to be like that 50-year-old photographer, you bump into like every now and then. Mentorship can even just be asking your buddy, like, give me an honest opinion. Like, don't high five me because you're my friend. Like, that doesn't help any of us grow. Like, what is it? And just accepting that and like taking a step back and saying, okay, well, if this person sees my photographs that way, why? Like, how come I don't see that? So I think that's a different style of mentorship, and it can happen at any point. Early on is probably a little bit more better and structured, but then like you could be 5, 10 years into it and like hit it, you know? Because I think that idea of like 10,000 hours, 7 years before you fully even start to understand what you're doing, you know? So it can happen at any point.
I want to switch gears a little bit, talking a bit more. We touched upon kind of the commercial aspects of photography, and being in San Francisco, I feel like a very common question I get is, should I quit my job? So
it's like the dream, right?
There's a lot of things implied when you say that.
Yeah.
Just by show of hands, how many people here make their living off of photography? Got a couple. And how many people here want to make their living off photography or wish they could? So a couple more hands.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on someone trying to pursue that life, and how did you pursue that to get a point where you could call it your profession or your career, or how you earn your living?
Well, I think for people pursuing it, like the idea to me is that it depends what photography means to you. If photography is this self-expressive passion, like, and I mean that in a way that you go out and you do it, the first thought isn't, oh, like, this is going to make me rich, this is going to make me famous, this is, that none of those thoughts are even there. It's a fulfilling thing that you get. Like, it's a whole process. You make the photograph. It's like, I experienced that when I was skateboarding as a 12, 13-year-old. Like, you go out by yourself, you have your skateboard, you interpret what's around you, and the feeling was just fun. Like, it was this thing. So photography was the same thing. You go out by yourself with a camera. There's rules, but there's no rules. Do what you want, make your photographs. So to me, it was fulfilling. And I think if you're a person and you found that thing that just makes you happy without all the bullshit, then that's winning to me. So it's kind of like, focus on that. Don't focus on so quickly, like in a year or 2 years into it, all right, now I want to make money with this, because you're going to take this thing that you love and that gives you so much joy. And now it's like, well, fuck, now this is the thing that I hate. I got to go make money with this. I don't want to go shoot this job. I hate the subject matter. The day you started hating to pick up your camera, it's like you killed the thing that you love. So I feel like if you have the day job that you can manage with, just keep doing that, because now this thing that you love, you're not putting the pressure on it to make me money, sustain my living. And that's a very powerful thing. You have the time and the freedom to find yourself, because that could happen the same thing. You can be a working photographer, and next thing you know, you're an e-commerce photographer, and while money's probably great shooting for Target or Amazon, but it's like, no offense, but to me that's almost can be very stale. You're in a studio and it's like, okay, stand there like this, like that, whatever. Okay, change clothes, same thing. Like, so I think it's a matter of like what it means to you. And if it's a love thing with photography, then nurture that. Don't rush into it. It'll happen over time, because you just got to let it happen. I think the idea for every artist or photographer is that you want it to happen on your own merit, not someone pulling up a mood board and saying, okay, like, can you copy these images? Can you make it look like this? You're going to say, yeah, like, I understand f-stop and settings. Like, I'll make it look like that, but there's no fun in that either. Versus someone saying, hey, we've seen what you do when you shoot at a park or when you shoot this. Like, this is a concept for our program. Can you shoot it? And I think that's the end goal for everyone. It's like you want to be able to get recognized for your creativity and have it translate into an ad campaign or translate into some commercial aspect.
I want to play devil's advocate for a second. I'm going to put my business owner hat on, which is always on. But, like, this is my challenge. I've worked with photographers in the past, and I like their work. And then I'll try to give them free reign. And then there's like this, you're off now, and then I'm a little scared, actually. And it's okay, because I'm the owner, I write the checks, so it's like, fine, if I make a mistake, it's disappeared. But from other people, they might get fired over a bad photo shoot. So talk to me about how that interaction could work better if you were someone out there hiring photographers and you wanted to, use that as a representation of your profession. And you really can't roll the dice with, let's say, someone who's telling me I want to express my art through this commercial photo shoot.
I understand where you're coming from. So I think it's a balance of, like, I've had other photographers shoot like lookbook stuff for like visual, and like different aesthetics. Like the 3 or 4 that I've done, they're all different aesthetics, and I'm like, go do your thing. Like if it comes back, if there's one photo, like I'm willing to take the chance, because to me that is like I don't like I'd feel like I'd be such a hypocrite if I didn't allow that freedom of like, hey, like just do your thing with this. Like, but I do think like for photographers, it's that challenge, and it's like it's standing by your own merits versus caving in to like, okay, like I'll do it your way. Like I think you got to be willing to say, hey, like this is me. Either you like it or you don't. And there's something to that. There's something to saying no, or something to standing your ground versus like conforming to something you're not going to be happy about. Because if the work comes out and you're not proud of it, like, you know, like you're not going to tell anybody, you're not going to share. But also that's the other factor I'll tell people is anytime I've been approached for any outside kind of commercial job, the first thing I do is no, don't tell me how much I'm going to make from it. Like, what is it? If I'm excited to do it, then cool. Like I'm going to do it. The money's the bonus, because once you take that out of the equation, like, and you ask yourself, am I excited to do this, or is this just a paycheck? The work that you're going to output is totally different. That's just what's helped me, I think, you know, because it's like, again, doing what you love is the first thing. Money, anything else beyond that's like extra and bonus. That's the way I always, you know, approach it. And going back to your question about like, for me, you're talking about like turning it into a profession. Like for me, I was just at a point in my life where there's so much negativity in a sense. I mean, I was over the career I was currently working at the time, like literally thousands and thousands of dollars in debt, like owed back pay to my mortgage, owed back pay to credit cards. And I stopped stressing. Like for me, it was just really like, okay, well, I don't have any money to fix any of these issues right now, but I do have a camera. And that camera, to me, if I go out and I shoot, it puts me in a better mood and makes me happy. So either I could sit and stress about something I have completely no control over, or I can go make photographs that make me happy, and the translation of energy. So it wasn't about like, oh, this is gonna be a profession. It was just really like, you know what, like at this point in my life, I just want to see like what makes me happy, and like if I follow it, where will it take me? And it was definitely a gamble. I mean, I was like prepared to like lose my condo. I was prepared to like just, hey, yeah, you know what? What's bankrupt? 7 years? All right, like fuck it, nothing's permanent. You know, like I don't know. I was just like, that's where I was at, and I think sometimes you have to like consider the situation you're in and like what makes more sense. But it wasn't about being professional. It was like, with so much bullshit around me, I just want to be happy. This thing makes me happy.
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to when I get to meet with other owners and creatives like yourself, and it feels like a common theme I hear is something similar to your situation where you had to be put kind of in an uncomfortable situation, and you had to find that path out, and that pressure kind of helped you find that. How do you keep that going today, even though you've reached a point where you don't have to necessarily like earn your meals with your commercial work? Like how do you maintain still some of that pressure today?
Well, I mean, from my pressure is just the idea of like never going back. I remember like, having the last kind of job that I had and having like an hour and a half commute each way. Like you never forget that. You never forget like, well, there's some great workplaces out there. There are some shitty ones. And it's just like, do I want to go back to that? Like, no. Because even like the idea of when I started visual was just the idea of this makes me enough money to like do what I love. That's all I want. It wasn't like I need enough money for X, Y, and Z. It was like, I just want enough to like live and do this thing every day. So I think like just remembering of like, okay, like whatever bad times might have been, remembering that. I think for me, like having, you have kids, like having a child puts that on you. Like, I want to keep this going, like in a bigger picture for them. Like not just like a roof over their head, food in their bellies, but also inspiration to them. And it's like, wow, like I grew up with parents that didn't follow what they loved. I'm sure your parents probably, like,
I don't know.
a lot of people in here might have grown up with parents that like never followed what they love and just like did what they had to do. So I think like the idea is like to a child, like demonstrating like you can follow what you like and it can work out. You just got to stay focused on it.
I want to shift gears a little bit into kind of your own personal habits and what you do to kind of stay fresh, stay inspired. Is there any other industry or profession that you draw inspiration from that helps your photography?
I would think just like other various forms of art, like painting and sculpting. I think like, especially just for like portraiture kind of stuff, like go to your local museums like every month, like see what's going on, like look around. And that's a bigger inspiration to me, is like just seeing like this insane art from like hundreds, thousands of years ago in person. Like that, you take that in, like how people use light, how people use scale and shadowing. So that's always like a main thing. As far as like other types of inspiration, I think it just comes from like life. You know, it's like textures, it's colors, it's people you meet, it's conversations you have. Um, just always be willing to like listen and absorb. I think that's when you turn everything off, or you're tunnel vision or closed minded. That's when you lose inspiration, because it's all around you. You just gotta like pause and like look at it and say, well, what is it here? You know.
And what do you do when you feel creatively spent? When you feel like a little burned out?
Yeah, I mean, with photography, I hear this question a bit. For me, it's like I tell people, put the camera down and just enjoy life. Like, if you're not inspired, you're not making photographs, it's all right. Put it down. Like, it'll call you. It'll happen. Because again, that's an unwanted pressure. Like, I think, again, going back to like trying to post every day, you got to go out and make photos every day. And, you know, one of the best things, I was talking with Rich earlier, one of the best things I heard is recently was, you know, if you want to make something that everybody's going to like, it's going to be average. And I think that's 100% true, because it's like, if you look at the scale, you know, of photographs on Instagram, like beautiful sunsets, like, yeah, they're pretty, but in comparison, they're average. Like, you know, your new car shot, it's cool, it's average though. Like, your food, like, it's amazing dish. I'm getting hungry, but it's still, like, you know, there's a scale of things that fall into being average, because you got to produce it so much. Like, you know, really, to me, in my opinion, a really strong photograph, you can't go out and make that like every single day. So I think when you're shooting, you put that pressure on yourself. I got to shoot something, and like, especially if you're in your city, it's very hard to like, oh, I'm bored, I'm uninspired, I've already been here, I've already been there. And I think sometimes if that hits, just put the camera down and walk and relax your eyes and just take something in. And it's okay to miss a photograph. It's okay to not have a camera on you when that moment happens. It's just, you know, it's fuel for the next time. It's like, okay, now I know what I'm looking at. Now I know what I want to shoot. Now I know what I see.
Now I know, no more food and cars and sunsets on my Instagram. Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about like taking risks.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what are some ways that people can approach risks nowadays? I would say both creatively and just, you know, with their own personal lives or their pursuit of their profession or passion. What are some ways that you think about taking risks, or how do you approach it when you feel like it's something that could be risky?
I think risk can be good. You know, I think everyone has their own self-auditing they got to do of the situation, with what the risk entails. My advice, and this probably is bad, but it's like, if you're, say, like mid-20s or your 20s, and, you know, like you have the job. It's nothing that you love. It's nothing that's like, you can't give it up. But I feel like if you have the job and you want to pursue something, chances are you could probably save up your money, quit, try something, see if it works. If not, you're going to find another job. I think there's like that level of like risk, in a sense of just like life. And I think it's okay. I think you just got to evaluate, like, well, what are the fallouts, or what could the possibilities of the endings become? Can I live with it? Sure. Then you really just got to believe yourself and question yourself and follow it. Like, asking other people's advice, like, I wouldn't even do it. Just ask yourself, you know, sit by yourself and ask that. Creatively, I think it's commitment. I think, you know, you can get known or get appreciated for making certain kind of photographs. And I think it's hard to like drift away from that, because the attention is when you get a lot of constant positive attention, it's tough to like abandon that. But I think if your mind is shifting, it's like, you don't want to feel like I have to make this thing over and over and over. I think you should feel like, okay, well, that's my phase. I'm done with that now. I'm free to move on. And, you know, you just have to stick with it and demonstrate to people what it is. Because if you only do it once in a while, or share that work once in a while, people might not fully get it. But if you kind of stick to like, this is where my headspace is at. Like, I've done that. Because I think the whole thing is, if you pick it up and you're doing the same thing you did over and over, that's not fun. At least in my opinion, it's not fun or exciting. Like, to know you're going to successfully do something, like, that's not exciting. Like, it's fun to like experiment. It's fun to have fails, and it's fun to like finally get it and find different ways to get it.
I tend to find people that when they approach risks, it's always not enough or too much, you know? Mm-hmm. Some people just always want to risk it all. They always want to go all in, and it's like, whoa, dude, like.
Well, I think like the biggest thing that I feel with risk or changes in life is that no matter how intimidating or heavy a moment might be, nothing in life is permanent in the big picture. Like, you could be happy, you could be broke. That doesn't mean you're broke for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean you're going to be unhappy for the rest of your life. Nothing I got snap. You know what I'm saying? No, but like, for real, like that was the biggest thing when I went through my like, okay, what am I gonna do? It's like nothing's permanent. Like once you really soak that into your mindset of like opportunities or moments, it's like, yeah, like nothing is. It's not gonna be this way forever. You just have to get through whatever the bullshit is, you know, to get to the other side. But that's what it is, you know. So I think that's a helpful mindset.
Going back a little bit to like your personal approach, do you have any habits that you've picked up recently, or habits that you've carried on throughout the years that you don't hear too many people doing too much? I'll give one too after you're done.
Okay, like constructive habits in the sense of like the process, or
Yeah, probably more constructive, not like.
I don't know. I think for me, I think the challenge for me now is no matter the subject matter, if I've already photographed it one kind of way, like don't photograph it. Like I don't need another photograph like that, you know? So it's kind of like pause and like really the angles, you know? So with photography, it's angles. It's not just like make the one photograph, I got it, I'm done. It's like, no, even if you feel like you made the photograph, well, what else am I missing? Like, and really kind of like dissect it. So I think like that's where I've kind of been at recently, where it's just like, I don't just move on. It's kind of like, okay, hold on. Let me like walk around this pillar a few times. Like, let me get close. Let me get back. Like, well, let me see something.
Yeah, mine would be similar to what we were talking about, which is I think trying to take on a different artistic endeavor, even if you stink at it. You know, like I've been working with wood a lot lately. I don't do anything professional with wood, but for me, just spending those 3 hours trying to sand down a piece of wood just gives me time to think. So that would be my habit of what I do.
No, it's good. It's a good break. That's why it's like no matter like if you're used to like a certain kind of subject matter, like what I would suggest to anyone out there is like take a day to go shoot something entirely different. Like just try to find like your take on how to make it interesting. Like that opens up your eyes, because if it's like you go to the same setting all the time, then it's like it's hard to like really see like the macro micro in it and like what's different here. You're just kind of seeing like, all right, I'm bored, you know. So even for myself, like what I did this past year was to not travel as much, stick around to be with my daughter. I was like, okay, well, I live in LA like every other city. We all live in our hometown. We all can get bored. We can say I'm uninspired, I'm bored. So what I decided to do was just pick an area, like roughly for a month or so, a month and a half, and that's the only area I would photograph. I would never be, okay, well, I'm going to go to the beach. Like, no, like for this 4 or 5 weeks, I'm only photographing this area. So if I go back and I photograph all the buildings, all right, what else? Okay, there's people here. What else? There's colors and textures on the wall. What else? Like you look and you really start to understand the area and you're challenging yourself. It's like, I'm not coming back with the same photos I made 2 weeks ago. I want to like find something different. So I think like just trying to like step back and figure out how do I inspire myself, even with my hometown setting or even with different subject matter. That's the thing that I would say. It's like whether it's woodwork, whether it's like, hey, you don't have to try painting a day. If you don't want to like make photographs, go buy canvas, just try painting, see what happens. Like you don't have to stick to just this. Like it's an explorative like world. So, and one can lend itself to the other.
Then you can add it to your Instagram profile. You just like do it one
Painter,
time and you're like chef. Yeah.
Exactly.
Got it. So we're wrapping up. I want to ask one final question for you. You mentioned your daughter. You know, we both have kids, so we've talked a little bit about, you know, the advice question gets asked a lot. I think it's a very loaded question because advice depends on who you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
So when you're given like a general audience like this, you know, you tend to give kind of a vanilla response, so to speak, something that can apply to a lot of people. But if your daughter came to you and was like, I want to become a photographer, what's one piece or two pieces of advice you would tell her that you wouldn't normally tell? This is kind of a personal question, but like you wouldn't normally tell like some guy coming up to you that you don't have any context, some person coming up to you?
I would just tell her, like, I think if it was a couple pieces of advice, one would be like, I would honestly tell her, don't rush to make money with it. And I would say just like, but it's actually funny because like in the realm of that, it's probably advice I'll tell everyone else. It's like, don't rush to make money into it and do your best to not give a fuck what anyone else is saying or thinking about your photography or what you're doing for the most part. You know, like if it's an opinion that matters, consider it. But like for the most stuff, like do as much as you can exploring on your own. Like that's one part, because I think what happens is you'll evolve. Like you can have as much fun running around making photographs as long as you're enjoying it and having fun with it, first and foremost, and then maybe you reach a point where this is just a fun hobby to me, or this is becoming something bigger to me, and where do I want to go with this bigger picture of, making photographs?
I'll give an answer to that too. I think for me, it would be, I've got a son and a daughter now. I would say it's okay to be in a job that you hate. That's a weird, thing. I think generally speaking, people are like always trying to do what you love. But this, when I started the company, I've told you this before, it was because I had a job I hated. And I hated it so much that I had to find something else to do.
Yeah.
And I actually don't know if I would have done it if I was at like a medium hate job. It was like a deep hate job that I was like, I gotta escape, and it was simply kind of talking about the theme of pressure. So, what do you suggest to a new photographer who's trying to find a community of local photographers?
Obviously, I would probably say Instagram can maybe be a place to start. It's not the most I would recommend. I think sort out or seek out galleries. Even for example, the Leica store over there, they have constant gallery rotations. Pay attention when there's opening night. Go there, and you'll probably meet some cool like-minded people. They got cool people working the store. But not only them, if there's other photo galleries around, go get involved. So it's not just a matter of hey, let's go make photos together. It's finding people who enjoy photography, viewing it, looking at it, and I think that's how you can build from there.
Cool. Next question. Analog has been making a resurgence from records, books, etc. New film has been joining the party. Do you think film is going to make a strong comeback, or will it fizzle out as another giant fad?
I think it's gonna have a base. I talked to people at Sammy's Camera in LA. They're actually expanding their development area just because of the volume of stuff coming in. I do think there's probably been a long gap of just constant digital connection, whether it's music, photography, that there's an excitement to the tangibility of a film strip, a vinyl record, especially with photographs. A great photograph is great no matter if it's through a digital camera, an iPhone, a film, but there is something rad about a tangibility of film that is negative, it's preserved, it's just, there's a different feeling to it. So I feel like it is going to stay. My question when I talk about this with other people is there's probably 60%, maybe, I would say 60-70% of people are doing point and shoots. It's easy access. You just load the film, shoot, you bring it to a lab. Chances are you never touch your film. Chances are you don't scan it. They give you back a thumb drive. They email you the pictures. So you're still living in a digital age. You just, have this end result from the film. I'm curious to see if that scale grows, where people kind of outgrow the automatic point and shoots and they want a manual camera to really, okay, now I'm really going to see where film takes me. I'm going to manual focus. I'm going to be pushing and pulling the ISO. You're going to really experiment with film. So I'd like to say that it's going to evolve to that, but I guess it's this new boom in the past 2 years or so, 3 years, that I think we'll have to probably wait another 5 to see.
Have you ever worked in a darkroom before?
In high school. Yeah. So just for me, the way I shoot a good amount. I'm actually going to take a development class with Ray Barbie at a Leica Academy class in LA, just to have fun of self-development of black and white film. But it's volume. So for me, I pay for the convenience of, if I have 10 rolls, I don't want to be sitting in my house. It's I got other things that I could be doing. But I do enjoy the idea of scanning and understanding scanning and processing it like that. So that's my counterbalance of time consumption. The comment that I'll say that I feel what I see the presentation of film on social is sometimes people seem to care more about what's outside the frame than what's in it. You know what I'm saying? They want to see Tri-X 400, or they want to see the film, versus inside. The inside sometimes is very empty. There's nothing that's well, what is it? A bad photo is a bad photo, whether it's digital, whether it's film. That frame around it doesn't make it any better. So I think that's where people's heads are at. It's I want you to know that it's film, because even a point that I would say is I enjoy sharing a photograph, and I don't always make it a point, this is film, hashtag film, because I just want the viewer to look at the photograph. Because when you dominate it with this is film, this is a film photograph, you're overriding the message of the picture. Now the person's okay, well, it's film. Is that going to make me think or look at it differently? No, how about just leave it blank, let the person absorb it, and then they can say, hey, well, what was this made with? Go from there. So I think that's where people's heads are at too. It's kind of they're so excited to be using film that it's like they're not considering what's in the frame. It's just scan the border. Subconsciously, I think when we reference the back of our camera, like it could be referencing a classic street photograph, it could be referencing a cityscape or something. You're kind of like, does that look like, subconsciously it happens. You're looking at, does that look like that? Okay, that's a good photograph. Versus the film, the more you experiment and you get in there with film, you're not seeing it. Like you're more likely, even if it's a fucked up blurred shot or something, to be more original to you than making something like someone else did. So that, yeah, I would say film.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time.
That's it? That was all of it? Wow.
That was it.
Okay.